Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever just been scrolling online and, wondered if that witty comment or maybe that helpful response actually came from a person?
Oh, absolutely.
It feels like AI is getting so sophisticated, the line is really starting to blur, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. That feeling of uncertainty, it's becoming way more common, and it's being fueled by some, well, pretty compelling new research, actually.
Exactly, because this isn't just like science fiction anymore, right? We're diving into a new study making a pretty bold claim that OpenAI's latest language model, GPT 4.5, hasn't just squeaked by the famous Turing test.
Mm-hmm.
But in certain setups, people actually thought it was more human than another human they were interacting with.
It's a fascinating idea, and I know you, our listener, are probably thinking, wait, what does that even mean?
Right.
Well, in this deep dive, we're going to break down this study, look closely at how the researchers did it, and really explore what these surprising results could tell us.
And to get there, we've got excerpts from a news article that covered this potentially groundbreaking study. Our mission today is, well, pretty straightforward to really understand why this research is significant
Yeah.
and what it reveals about the rapid advancements in artificial intelligence and maybe our fundamental understanding of what we consider human-like intelligence.
So before we get into the details of this new work, it's important to have a little context about the benchmark they're using to measure these advancements, the Turing test.
Right, the Turing test. Now, for anyone who might not be super familiar, this concept came from the brilliant mind of Alan Turing, a British mathematician, computer scientist, way back in 1950.
Mhm.
You might recognize his name, maybe in connection with The Imitation Game, that film. It touched on some similar ideas about machines and intelligence.
Precisely. And Turing's core thought experiment was really about establishing a way to assess if a machine could demonstrate intelligent behavior that was essentially, indistinguishable from a human being. It was
Yeah.
a really revolutionary concept for its time.
Okay, so how does this classic Turing test actually play out? What's the setup like?
Well, the traditional setup involves three participants, a human interrogator, right? And then two others hidden from the interrogator. One is a human and the other is a machine.
Oh,
The interrogator can communicate with both, usually by typing questions and getting typed responses. And the machine's goal, it's to convince the interrogator that it is the human.
okay.
If the machine can successfully fool the interrogator a significant portion of the time, it's, well, considered to have passed the Turing test.
Okay, that gives us the historical framework. Now let's get into this new study that's generating so much buzz. What exactly did the researchers do differently?
Right, here's where it gets really interesting. This new preprint study, and by preprint we mean it's a version of the research that hasn't yet been formally reviewed and published in a scientific journal. That's key.
Got it. Early stage.
Exactly. It involved close to 300 participants. These individuals were randomly assigned to one of two roles, either the interrogator, whose job was to figure out who was human and who was AI,
Second.
or one of the two witnesses they were interacting with. One witness was a real person, and the other was an AI chatbot.
And what kind of interactions were they having? Like, what were the AI models being asked to do in these tests?
So the researchers used two different kinds of instructions or prompts for the AI models, specifically OpenAI's GPT 4.5 and another powerful AI language model called Llama.
Llama, right.
The first type was a no persona prompt. In this case, the AI was simply told, you are about to participate in a Turing test. Your goal is to convince the interrogator that you are a human. Pretty basic.
Okay, straightforward.
And with this basic instruction, GPT 4.5 managed to convince the human interrogators about 36% of the time.
So wait, even without any special instructions on how to act, it still fooled people more than a third of the time. That actually still sounds pretty remarkable, doesn't it?
It is, yeah, it's a notable achievement in itself. But then the study introduced a really fascinating twist. They used a persona prompt. Here, the AI was specifically instructed to adopt a particular personality. For example, one persona was described as like a young person who was knowledgeable about the internet and culture.
So they gave the AI a role to play, a kind of character profile to embody in its responses. That makes sense. And what happened when they did that?
The results were, well, quite dramatic. When GPT 4.5 was using the persona prompt, its success rate in being identified as human shot up to 73%.
Wow, 73%. That's a huge jump from the 36% with the no persona
Oh,
prompt.
massive jump.
So 73%, that's well beyond just flipping a coin. So based on that significant increase, what was the main conclusion the researchers drew?
Well, the lead author of the study, Cameron Jones, who's a researcher at UC San Diego's Language and Cognition Lab, He stated quite clearly that these results indicated the Turing test, at least in this specific setup, had been beaten fair and square.
Beaten fair and square. And he had a direct quote about that, right? If I remember correctly. What exactly did he say?
Yes. Jones wrote that, quote, people were no better than chance at distinguishing humans from GPT 4.5 and Llama with the persona prompt.
No better than chance.
Right. Considering that random chance would be 50%, a 73% success rate for the AI in being perceived as human really highlights how difficult the participants found it to tell them apart.
That's really quite something. So a machine, when given a specific personality to work with, was actually more likely to be perceived as human than an actual human participant in the test. Is that what they're saying?
That's pretty much the key implication of these findings, yes. And Jones didn't just focus on the academic implications, beating the test. He also pointed to some potentially significant real-world consequences that could arise from this level of human-like mimicry.
Such as? What kind of broader impacts did he foresee?
Well, he suggested that if these large language models, or LLMs as they're often called, can convincingly imitate humans in short online interactions without anyone being able to tell, it could lead to increased automation of jobs that involve that kind of communication.
Okay, that makes sense.
He also raised concerns about the potential for improved social engineering attacks. Think about more convincing phishing scams or, manipulative online interactions and just more generally potential societal disruption.
So this isn't just some interesting academic finding in a lab. The ability of AI to convincingly act like a human in online interactions could have some pretty significant real-world ramifications.
Definitely.
What was the initial buzz around this study when it was released? I can only imagine social media had a lot to say.
Oh, it certainly did. Yeah, the findings definitely ignited a lot of conversation online. Many users expressed a mixture of surprise, maybe some amusement, and genuine questions about what the future might hold as AI continues to advance to this level, particularly if these success rates get even closer to, say, 100%.
Were there any particular social media reactions that really stood out to you from the article?
Yes, a few comments really captured the essence of the online discussion. One user humorously noted something like, we've reached the point where a machine has become better at being human than, well, a human, at least in online chats.
Huh.
Another user pondered a more maybe thought-provoking question, asking, I wonder how much this has to do with people becoming less intelligent. Which is interesting.
That's a take.
And a third raised a really interesting point about the implications if AI consistently passes this kind of test near 100% of the time, especially when we consider that humans themselves might only be perceived as acting consistently human around maybe 50% of the time in such scenarios.
That last point really makes you think, doesn't it, about what our own expectations and perceptions of human-like behavior even are.
Exactly.
And going back to Cameron Jones's point about LLMs potentially stepping in for people in brief interactions without being detected, that has some pretty big implications for various industries, right?
Absolutely. I mean, think about customer service roles, online technical support, maybe even certain forms of online content creation. If an AI can handle these short exchanges in a way that's virtually indistinguishable from a human, and in some cases, apparently, even more convincingly, it opens up a whole range of possibilities for automation across different sectors.
So bringing this back around to you, our listener, who we know values getting in-depth knowledge efficiently, this study really appears to mark a potential turning point, maybe, in the field of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, it seems like it.
It's moving beyond just complex calculations and data analysis into mastering the kind of subtle art of human communication.
And as you navigate various aspects of your life, both personally and professionally, and encounter these increasingly sophisticated AI tools, understanding this level of capability is probably going to be more and more important.
Right.
While this specific study focused on relatively brief interactions, the underlying abilities it showcases have the potential to influence a wide spectrum of applications. It really prompts us to consider our own definitions of intelligence and what we even consider effective communication.
Okay, so let's synthesize what we've explored here. The key takeaway seems to be that OpenAI's GPT 4.5 model, particularly when it was instructed to adopt a specific human-like persona, was more frequently identified as a human than an actual human participant in this recent Turing Test study.
Mm.
This signifies a really notable step forward, it seems, in AI's capacity to mimic human-like conversation.
And it's crucial, again, to keep in mind that this research is currently in the preprint stage.
Right, the peer review.
Exactly, which means it's still awaiting that critical peer review process that will further examine its methodology and conclusions. The scientific discussion around these findings is very much ongoing.
Definitely something to watch. So as AI continues on this trajectory of becoming increasingly adept at sounding and even, well, behaving like us, here's a final thought for you to consider. As these artificial intelligences become more convincing in their interactions, what new questions or even challenges might arise in our understanding of genuine connection, authenticity in communication, and maybe the very essence of what it means to be human in a world that includes such sophisticated artificial intelligence?
The big question.
It definitely feels like we're entering a new and somewhat uncharted territory.